And from one colleague to another, from Alex to Hanna, she's coming back now. She will be guiding us through this next panel discussion, how to build a digitally sustainable and ethical business considering privacy, cybersecurity with the use of new technology. And now you will get an applause, Hanna.
Thank you. So I'm just gonna, I have the biggest panel, I think, so I'm gonna move the chairs a bit so you all will fit in here. So Alex, please come back up. We already introduced you, so Alex will be part of this panel as well with the extremely long panel name title. And I would also like to welcome my other panelists. First, we have Evelina Antilla. She's the managing partner at early stage venture capital fund Wellstreet. She's active in AI, tech, and business forums, where she frequently speaks about AI investments, ethics, and policy matters. She was also previously part of building up the Nordic leading AI company Pelterion, and she has a background as an M&A lawyer, so it feels good with another lawyer here present. She's also the co-founder of legal tech company Justic and an advisor to AI Sweden, as well as holds board positions. So welcome, Evelina.
Thank you.
Corinne Hedlund Nytén. She has a background as a privacy and data protection expert with previous experience as head of data protection education at ICA-gruppen, and she was the head of privacy at Fondia. She's now the head of legal and privacy at the privacy-focused hiring platform Jobylon, a company that actively uses their privacy efforts and their head of legal in their marketing campaigns, which is very interesting, I think. And finally, we have Nicolas. He is from Canea Partner Group, and he has worked as a management consultant at Canea since 2007. His main areas of expertise include strategy work, management systems, auditing, process development, and business development. In assignments, he is usually the project manager, assignment manager, or expert, and he has a degree in civil engineering, and he has also completed that with an MBA. So I think we have a very good and strong panel here, so we can just give them a round of applause to begin with. I can talk about this topic at length, using privacy and security as a business advantage and also embedding ethics into business strategy. So I will try to keep us on time. But I'm going to start with you, Corinne. Jobylon use privacy as sort of a business advantage, competitive advantage when you talk externally. A lot of LinkedIn action on that. It's a very bold move to use legal compliance sort of in your marketing campaigns. What are your thoughts on that? Why have you chosen to embed this into your strategy? And also, is it working for you business-wise? Do you gain profits from doing so?
Yeah, of course. So I think, as we all can agree on, I mean, privacy is for everyone. Everybody has to work with privacy. So I think just early on, Jobylon realized, and kudos to our CEO, Aref, realized that, okay, so we're a tech platform. We work with a lot of data. We have to work with privacy compliance. And prioritizing privacy has really shown to build trust with our customers. So having that competence and in sales sourcing processes, being able to just answer questions properly, having done our homework and our groundwork has really enabled us to build trust. And what we've seen is that, I mean, everybody does it, but it's become our competitive advantage, that we're just very knowledgeable in this area.
Well, Evelina, building on that, you are an early stage tech investor. People come to you and pitch their ideas. Have you noticed that companies are using their security, privacy efforts as a business advantage, or do you ask questions about that? And is it something that's necessary, like Corinne said, to be able to answer in a proper way in order to secure an investment?
Yeah, I think we see it more. So as you mentioned, we're a super duper early tech investor. Typically, it's the founding team and an idea. So at this stage, we also have the possibility to have an impact also when it comes to using that as an advantage. But obviously, we invest then in tech companies, and what I've seen more and more is that you use that not only sort of in your sales pitch, but also early on building into it in your tech. And I think it makes sense, not at least from a regulation perspective. When it comes to investments, we as an investor, we're an Article 8 fund. We have an ESG framework to follow. Governance is a big part of that. So when we look into fintech companies, for example, which many of them handles privacy questions, for example, that is one of the key sort of assessments when we look at the case. But then it's also part of our work when we sort of work with the companies to make sure that they are on the right path. And it's all about building big companies and making them sort of investable for later stage investors.
And would you say that there's a difference between companies that are starting out now when it comes to talking about privacy, security, embedding these practices into their strategies compared to companies that's been around for a longer while, but also within the tech sphere?
Yeah, I mean, it's a broad question, and I guess, I mean, obviously there was a big shift when we had GDPR coming into our lives. Which I think is also interesting now that we have EU AI Act coming into our lives. And if you sort of embed that mindset early on, obviously you will have an advantage. And I think, I mean, what is also interesting with GDPR, because it's a regulation for EU, but I mean, it impacts the entire world. And I think we will see the same with AI Act. So for that sense, from that perspective, I think that companies based here might have this as an advantage as well.
And we heard before when Matt had his keynote speech that basically every organization in here is a target in some way or other when it comes to cyber threats. So Alex, building on Evelina's experience with tech startups, would you say that tech companies, innovation companies are more or less targeted? And if so, why?
Yeah, good question. Yes and no. I mean, the thing with threats is some are indiscriminate. So it's just about, do you have a vulnerability they can capitalize on? There might be specific targeting for espionage IP reasons. It kind of depends a little bit on the specific company, what they're doing. So I wouldn't say it's particularly one more than the other. It's kind of nuanced.
And since Nicolas, both you and Alex have experience of working very closely with board members, leaders, management in setting strategy, so we have a lot of CISOs, CTOs, DPOs here today that are trying to get these topics on the agenda and trying to get management on board and to build this into a more resilient strategy. What are your tips and tricks, if we start with you, Nicolas, on how to get traction internally from your boards and your management teams?
I can I can take an example from one customer that we work with. So typically, when you come in as a consultant, in some cases, management is all in and they understand everything and they have a good understanding of the threats and the risks, right? In some cases, not. So we had this case. It was a big management team, and I would say 8 out of 10 were not really aboard, right? But they had some regulatory requirements that they had to meet, but they didn't really get the scope of the risks, etc. So what we did some simple physical entry testing. So we actually showed how easy it was to enter the building, and we did the usual thing. We took some computers, some phones, created some commotion. And by doing this was the kind of the tipping point. So they saw that, yeah, this is really a management issue. It's not something only for the IT department. So that's an example.
Yeah.
We have to prove it in practice, in real life, with some examples.
And Alex, what are your recommendations?
I can think of 3 things. One of them, when you talk about responding to a major crisis, often the issues aren't with the individual areas of response, it's the coordination of the response between them. So trying to run, and we've seen some more mature organizations run full end-to-end crisis exercise from the operations to the executive, and the challenges it brings to life around governance and coordination with the board. And it's like five-a-side football where all the kids follow the ball. That's a bad way to run a crisis, and it brings that to life when you do those sort of exercises. The other thing I would say is it's as much about personal reputation and brand as it is about the organisation. You know, most organisations will continue happily after an attack, but will the CIO or CEO still be enrolled? That's another matter. So that personal reputational risk is something that does trigger a few. But they're also, it's about articulating the value and the impact. I mean, I have one client, they're a pensions administrator, and they're about to lose a $100 million a year contract with a major US bank because they couldn't demonstrate the right security. So I think the license to operate is a very big motivation. There's countless examples of that, especially if you do work with the government now. So, yeah.
And Corinne, you've managed as the head of legal in your organization to get this traction. And I mean, like you said, the company was built on this to begin with as well. But what are your experiences, and can you share some tips and tricks for getting privacy on the agenda?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, one thing is quite clear. Like, I'm involved in all sales processes now. Privacy, we work with a lot of larger enterprises. And we've only seen that privacy matters and security matters are only growing in importance during these processes. The questions become more and more detailed. So, I mean, that's one part, just really seeing the business side of privacy. But then I also think the other side, just within a company, I think it's really important to, I mean, sometimes laws can be complicated. Lawyers can sometimes be seen as very working on their own, in their silos. And I think it's really important for us lawyers to embed ourselves in the business. Really understand the business's strategic goals so that you can align your work with those goals. And also just educating and talking about privacy in a way that every employee understands. Like, what do I actually have to do in my day-to-day work to make sure that the company is doing everything that it can with when it comes to privacy. So I think there are several parts. So you have the business side, you also have the lawyer that has to think about the business and have a business mindset, but then also making sure that all employees actually understand what they need to do in their day-to-day work.
And Evelina, when you think about the companies that you're working with, have you seen that there are more investments being made before they come to you, and how they built their organizations in cybersecurity, in privacy compliance, and in the upcoming AI Act compliance as well? I'm thinking especially with tech companies that work heavily with AI or are built heavily on AI, especially generative AI.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I mean, from the investor perspective, I mean, we are in the middle of an AI hype, but what is also really interesting is if you compare it with previous AI hypes, we actually see like real progress right now, and companies actually getting real value out of it. Interesting though is that the AI adoption on enterprise level is still quite slow. But I think what we're starting to see right now, again from an investor perspective, is like an AI tech stack emerge, where you have the application layers, and then I'm talking about like if you're using a legal tech tool, for example, to review contracts, that's on the application layer. And then you have the model layer, which is basically OpenAI's models, GPT, or the open source models. And then you have the infrastructure layer, which is hardware, compute, clouds, etc. And I think there are, if you have that map, I think it's easier, or it's at least helpful, to sort of think about the risks around it, but also defensibility when it comes from an investor perspective. Like, where are the defensibility right now? We're in an era where basically the intelligence right now, the cost of intelligence is basically zero. Previously, that was a competitive edge, just having access to this technology. But right now, it's really hard to see where the value will be from an investor perspective, and also where the moats will be, because the application layer, the models that they are built on, it's the same as everyone else. It's trained on the same data. So that is one thing from an investor perspective right now, looking into these companies, just seeing where are they in this. And if we're looking at the winners right now, I would say it's the infrastructure layer. If NVIDIA is a good example of that. Applications, growing super fast, and they will have challenges coming right now with AI Act, obviously. And I mean, it's not that it's a lawless landscape. We have GDPR, we have copyright laws, but there will be an extra layer, which will mean more transparency, more reporting, more governance. And for startups, I think that could be quite burdensome because they don't have the resources. The big enterprise will have that, and which will entail that the business model might not look at as the pitch deck is right now. So I think it's really exciting times. I think it's really important to be humble and understand that we're learning the rules right now. There's a lot of like AI experts out there, and I mean there are real AI experts, but it's also a lot of opinions right now. And I think we should be humble and sort of see where this will go. Sorry, it was a very long answer to a short question, which could have been more straight to the point, but it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. I'm building on that with digital sustainability in mind. When you build your when you develop your tech and you build that on, for example, generative AI, ChatGPT, OpenAI models that we have seen now, they are in a bit of a pickle, especially copyright-wise, and with AI Act, it's transparency.
I mean, the OpenAI CTO not being able to sort of answer a simple question as like, what data have you trained your models on?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
tells you something. Yeah.
So that's going to be a problem, obviously. And from an ethical standpoint, how would you tackle that if you work with a company, for example, Nicolas, who are big on tech, heavy on tech, and have implemented these solutions, which I think a lot of people were very eager to do, using generative AI very quickly when it was available, maybe not thinking before, and then they come to you and say, well, what should we do now? How are we going to make this transparent and ethical and digitally sustainable?
Well, to be honest, I wouldn't say we work exactly with those types of companies. I think we work more at the mid-layer, mid-sized companies, smaller companies, and most of these companies, they don't really know where AI is going. So what we can help them with is to incorporate some things in their risk assessments and in their strategy work to see how can they benefit from AI and what could the potential risks be. So, but those are the general, the commonly, the common knowledge that we have now. That, for example, there are risks with managing personal identifiable information, surveillance issues, and things like that. So, but for most companies that we work with, it's more used to try to stay more or less informed.
And Alex, coming from the more technical point of view, with your experience, with all the new legislation that we've seen, especially on an EU level lately, that try to regulate tech, like the AI Act and GDPR, for example, do you feel like they are giving the appropriate, is it the appropriate framework to give, or are you lacking maybe some understanding from the legislators in how things actually work in practice?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Some regulatory regimes set a clear mandate, but no guidance on how. The US is quite good at that. It relies on the industry then to work out how to make it a reality, like the software bill of materials and zero trust stuff that came out a couple of years ago. Some regimes are very precise on the how, like in Singapore, you've got to do this, this, and this. I think with AI, it's going to have to be a bit principles-based, because no idea what AI is going to look like. I mean, we're trying to look at how to embrace AI within PwC, and it's a nightmare around everything from data governance to API gateways to chain GPT models. But the bit I worry about most, and I guess I don't think the regulators are going to think about that yet, is the Turing trap, which is obviously the Turing test is, can an AI emulate a human? The hardest corporate strategy for us to execute is one where we're using AI to emulate humans rather than AI to augment humans. So we've been trying to be quite precise on how we use AI, but a lot of the solutions that are coming out there is really to also try and emulate. And I think those are the sort of I'm more concerned about the societal risks or the impact to our workforce right now. But the tech's, I think whatever the regulation is now is going to have to be quite agile.
And I mean, it's happening. And we saw that Klarna I mean, they replaced 700 workers with AI. And I mean, we saw the strikes in Hollywood like a year ago. I think we will see more of that. So I think what's sort of lacking right now is a visionary leadership coming from the politics also. I think we need to cooperate. And I mean, I think also, I mean, looking back historically, typically revolutions like this create new kind of jobs. So it's more about like upskilling and reskilling.
And Corinne, from your perspective, have you noticed, because you've been a consultant before, worked with a lot of different organizations, have you noticed a shift when it comes to thinking about ethics as well, not just compliance?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're talking about that within Jobylon as well, like responsible AI and how fast are you going to move. And I think everybody, not only like the larger enterprises with like the spotlight on, is thinking about these questions. You're actually looking at it when you're a smaller enterprise as well, or mid-size. But it is interesting. I mean, I'm just thinking about, even from our perspective and all of our clients, they all have different perspectives on this as well. Some people want to move really fast and use all the technology that's out there, and other enterprises really want to take it slow and make sure that they have everything in place before they start utilizing these new tools. So it's diverse.
So we have a lot of new tools and new technology to work with, and then alongside that we have a lot of new legislations and frameworks. Nicolas, I can imagine that when you are talking to management teams and board members, that they feel like, well, we have the ISO standards, and then we have the GDPR, and then we have all the cybersecurity regulations. Is there a good way on how to integrate all the work that you're doing on the different risks? Because I can imagine that you feel like you're a bit overwhelmed with regulation.
No, the way we put it to our customers is, use a framework like ISO 27001 as a broad framework. And that framework actually accommodates for a lot of different things. So it's required, for example, to have a good understanding of laws, regulations. Be on top of that. There are many supplementary standards you can use for different areas, cloud services, data privacy, etc. So that's typically what we say. Use the ISO frameworks as a baseline. They don't cover everything, they don't have everything, but on the other hand, they don't tell you exactly how to do it. So it's up to each company or each organization. But you do get the framework, and you do get a systematic way of working, for example, with risks or threat intelligence, etc. So that's what we say. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah. But I think it's important to have sort of two minds two thoughts at the same time. When you sort of approach AI, obviously be aware of the risks, but I think the problem right now, what I'm worried about when it comes to Europe, is that we're lagging behind, and the development is happening in Silicon Valley, and it's basically like 5 companies that is building the future for us. So I'm more worried about us being behind, not at least from a democracy perspective. And that's why I think it's 2 things I want to sort of send with the audience here. And it's like, I think AI should be on every board's top priority. If not number 1, it should be number 2. Both like organizational wise and sort of making the business more effective and productive, but also to sort of staying competitive. And to sort of have a plan. That plan will definitely not work, but at least it's a plan, and then you can iterate on it. Because, I mean, we couldn't see that ChatGPT would happen like 6 months before it happened. And the second thing I want to also send from today is AI problem fit. Because not every problem warrants AI to use that. So if you are excited to get started, do this sort of mapping out of what problems could AI sort of have an impact on and help out. Because, and mainly that's my investor sort of classes. There's a lot of AI companies out there. They're popping up like mushrooms. But when you sort of scratch on the surface, it's not necessarily a problem that they are solving. And I mean, when it comes to building successful companies, it's about the problem, solving it, and making it fast.
Yeah, and Alex, when you work with your clients that are starting to work with AI or developing AI or buying in tech from other companies, what security risks do you see with that, and what advice would you give, especially if you're a buyer and if you're going to implement technology, software as a service, for example, with new technologies such as generative AI, for example?
Well, there are some useful frameworks like that. I think MITRE has one. PwC has one, and it's to consider the threats and the controls, because whether it's poisoning large language models, whether it's around data leakage, and I think just using that as a guidance. Now, the controls to mitigate them might be quite hard at this stage, but at least you know the direction you need to go in and think about it in a considered way. So I think that's probably the one at this stage in the journey. That's what I'd say. I'm sure there's lots of products claiming to, I've heard of web application firewalls to protect against AI data leakage, but I don't know. I've never played with any of them, and I don't think most of our clients have. So using that framework as a way to guide decision making is quite helpful.
So a question for all of you, and we can start with Nicolas and move forward. Do you think we will see companies and organizations being more eager to invest in competence and in hardware, software, and in advisors when it comes to privacy and cybersecurity moving forward, that they will see that this is a more valuable investment to do before the fact?
Yeah, definitely. We see that from an anecdotal point of view. We don't have all the statistics, but at least, the services, the humble services that we offer, like, for example, certifying against different ISO standards, etc., that's definitely on the rise. So yeah, definitely. And also, legal services as well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I can only agree. I've only seen on LinkedIn that, just a couple of years back, it wasn't as usual to look for privacy specialists, privacy counsels. We're building privacy teams. Maybe not always part of the legal team, sometimes part of the cybersecurity team. But so a big shift in the last couple of years, and I think the same with cybersecurity. These matters are only growing in relevance, so I don't see that. I definitely see the need.
I'll just pick up on that. One of the challenges I see with our organisation and most of my clients is that they might have a good understanding of privacy requirements, but there's a real gap around privacy engineering. So how do you implement privacy controls within your technology estate in an cost-effective manner? I don't know how many times I had questions for clients saying, I've got this cloud thing here, what should I do for privacy? What should I encrypt, anonymize, obfuscate? How should I do it? And it's just actually, there's a real lack of skills in privacy engineering right now.
Yeah, and in the venture capital world, there are several reasons why cyber security, cyber tech, defense tech is really, really hot right now, because there's a big need out there. And startups see the potential to sort of innovate much faster than big corporates can do it.
So do you think startups will be more of part of the solution to protect, to use tech to protect?
Yeah, but I think, the best way would be cooperation, sort of a big enterprise, big corp working more closely with startups, because startups have the opportunity to sort of fail fast, innovate fast, and enterprises, for good reasons, have their processes, which sometimes can be a bit burdensome if you want to innovate internally. Then it can be easier to do like an acqui-hire, for example, or buy software and systems from the outside.
It's quite interesting. I've sat on a few board meetings where they have a digital NED. Typically comes from a dynamic tech company, and they generally don't last more than a year because they get frustrated because they're like, well, just go and fix it. Someone's presented a problem, and of course it doesn't happen for various reasons. They're like, I'm not vibing with this culture here. It's not working for me. So I think that sort of digital NEDs from innovative tech companies, it's been a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, It's called like complex sales tech.
Yeah.
Or complex sales.
So to round off, I will end with Corinne as well. Since you guys are using privacy as a competitive advantage, and we've seen companies also starting to use their cybersecurity efforts as a competitive advantage, I think we saw that even before. Do you think more companies will follow suit in doing what you do? Maybe not putting their head of legal in their like YouTube videos, unless their head of legal wants to. But do you think that this will be something we see more regularly? Because I noticed what you guys were doing, and I thought it was a bit something that stood out to me on my LinkedIn feed. But do you think more companies will see the value of using it as a competitive advantage?
I think at least today, maybe somebody's gotten some inspiration to do so, because I really think that it works. And I really, sometimes people like to put compliance and business growth against each other. But I think that if you really can manage to put them together, to align them, then that's the way forward. So I really hope so. I hope that it's the direction that we're going.
Well, thank you so much, all of you. Very happy to have you here. And I will bring Måns back up.
Yeah, but you're staying, but we can give them an applause.
Yeah.